off your engine!
Rob Debbie says, Scotty, I went to Sears to buy a new car battery. Gee, I'm surprised you could find one that still was in existence. They didn't have a battery saver to store the memory, so they let the car idle while they changed the battery. They said it would be okay. Was that a safe thing to do? No, that just shows the idiots that they have working at that Sears. Maybe that's one of the reasons that they hardly exist anywhere anymore. You could have destroyed your car's computer doing that. Never, ever, ever, on any modern car, leave the car running when you disconnect the battery. When I was a young mechanic in the 1960s, we used to do that to see if the alternator was charging, or some of the old cars even had generators. And when you took it off, if you took it off and the car continued to run, that meant the alternator was working. And then you'd say, okay, it's working, and you'd put it back on and you'd look for another problem. Well, we've got all kinds of electric machines to check it with today, so we don't do that. But the reason you don't in a modern car is because it can destroy the computer system. You can get voltage surges that way. It could destroy the computer system of your car. Never, ever leave the car running with the battery disconnected. Those guys are absolute morons, which of course fits in with Sears itself, why they're practically bankrupt. And then they say, yeah, that's a safe thing to do. Yeah, the guys, there's one here in Houston, it's kind of funny. It went out of business long before the Sears did because they got shut down. They were putting so much fraud on people that they said, you can't do that anymore. And I read in California, I guess they even made all the Sears stop repairing cars, saying you can't fix cars anymore because you're screwing everybody over. You can just sell tires and batteries, but you can't actually fix the cars there. You should stay away from those people. And let's hope that short period of time it didn't damage any of the computers on your car, but never, ever disconnect a battery while the car's running in a modern car. Now, I mean, if you had a 55 Ford and they did it, that's okay, but I'm sure you've got a more modern car that has computers in it. Well, you think things are bad in the United States, the jobs moving to China? Hey, Mercedes-Benz just announced that they are not going to expand any production in Germany. Instead, they're cutting it. And guess where they're expanding their production? In China. Beijing-Benz Automotive Company, they actually sold twice as many Mercedes-Benzes in China than they did in Germany. So, looks like old Mercedes-Benz is cutting a little alliance with the Chinese there. They said that there's possibly 20,000 jobs that Mercedes-Benz may be cutting because, of course, they're not selling as many cars. And, of course, labor in Germany is infinitely higher than labor in China. In July, because of the pandemic, Mercedes says that they may lose up to 80,000 jobs in Germany. Now, of course, they're not talking about how many more jobs they're going to have in China. They neglected to give that information out. Now, more than half of Mercedes-Benz jobs for the whole company are in Germany. Take Volkswagen, less than 40% of their jobs are in Germany itself. And of course, they come up with excuses like, well, we want our manufacturing facilities to be closer to where they're sold. And they sold more of their cars in China than Germany, so they're planning on doing more production there. You know, just talk about a smoke screen for it. Let's get a cheaper way to build cars and sell them at the same outrageous prices. So it looks like even the Germans are jumping ship and sending their jobs to China, not just the United States. Billy Bob 17 says, I got an electric parking brake. Now, when I shut the car off, is that parking brake motor still using power to drain my battery? From all the cars I've worked on, no, it will not drain your battery. Your car's got electricity and it works. You turn the electric parking brake on, that sets it, but it also sets it mechanically. So when you shut off the car, the power is actually turned off to that electric parking brake, but it's got a system where it's locked in place mechanically. Now, on the other hand, let's say you're driving your car and it runs out of electricity. Your alternator stops charging the battery and it drives until it won't start anymore. And then when you try to start it, nothing happens. Well, then if you use the parking brake, it will not set in the first place. It has to have power to set, but once it's set, it's mechanically set too. And then when you onset it, the electric motor has to onset the mechanical part too. People have done some pretty stupid stuff, but they weren't that dumb when they built them. They didn't make them so that you have to keep battery power to them to keep them held on a hill, because then if you had your car on a hill, just think about it, and if your battery died while it was sitting there, it would roll down and smash into things. So they did have a little intelligence when they designed that thing. Well, with all this coronavirus stuff, travel trailers and RVs are getting more popular. You got your own family all together, you can go where you want. But let me give you some warnings from customers of mine who have done that in the past. Numero uno tip: if you're going to rent an RV, rent a diesel RV. They need torque for pulling themselves, but the bottom line is your pocketbook. You get a gasoline RV, those things go through gasoline like no tomorrow. The diesels are much more efficient at pulling them along. I rented a truck once that was gasoline, and I went through 20 gallons of fuel. Then I realized, hey, and it wasn't that far, it was less than 100 miles. And then the next time I rented a diesel, hey, I only went through like 4.5 gallons of diesel fuel. So if you're gonna rent one, get a diesel. But realize one thing. They always have those fantasy pictures of either the trailer or the SUV on a beautiful, pristine lake, and there you are with your family. Ha! See what the real world's like. You buy or rent one of those things, you got to park with everybody else in the RV park, in an area that's usually a dirty old field with mud in it if it's been raining. You don't get this fantastic view of the ocean or some fancy pristine lake. If you're going to do something like that, believe me, you're better to do one of those, tow a little car behind it to get around where you're going, because trying to park that giant RV in the middle of nowhere is going to surprise everyone. I had a customer one time who rented an RV. They went to New York City, and they had me made it to Times Square, right near this giant RV. They said, well, we couldn't find a place to park it. And think ahead. Just don't think, oh, this great vacation and we're all safe by ourselves. Hey, they use a lot of fuel, and you can only park them where the law allows you to park them. Roosh 3 says, Scotty, when I hit bumps and uneven roads, I hear a noise on the right side of the vehicle. I feel it on the accelerator pedal. Mechanic took all the wheels, tested sway bars, links, rods, ball joints. Everything's perfect. What could it be? All right. Well, the first thing is get another mechanic. The guy isn't very good. He did what you could do yourself, jack it up and pull on stuff. Now, a lot of times, suspension parts will not act up unless they're under a load. Unless the weight of the vehicle is on them and you're driving and you hit a rough road or bump, then all the weight of the car and the speed makes noises. Now, if you watch my video, Finding the Source of Car Noises, I have this device. Now, you can get them used on eBay for $50. The new ones are like $140. And what it does is it has 4 little sending units, like radio broadcast units, that you clamp on various parts of the car. Then a receiving unit with headphones, and it's got a clicker to select 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can select which thing you're hearing noise from. And you can pinpoint any noise that way, which the guy obviously doesn't have, because if he did, he would have found the noise. So first, start with a better mechanic who understands suspension systems better and knows how to check things out. You're paying him to check it out. He just did what anybody could do, jack it up and pull on it. Okay, if that doesn't show, then it has to be tested under a load, and you can only do that with the weight of the car on it driving down the road. XL200 says, Scotty, I found a 97 Plymouth Voyager on Craigslist for $1,500 with 117,000 miles. Is it a good deal to buy it? How reliable are those vans? Well, they're actually one of the worst vans ever made. But a lot of it does depend on how it was driven, who took care of it. Now, it's a 97. So what? It's 24 years old. It's a dinosaur. Now, it's only worth whatever anybody's going to pay. $1,500. I'd offer $1,000 if a mechanic checked it out and said the engine and the transmission was good. The transmissions were horrendous crappers on those. But if it's lasted this long, maybe it's already been replaced. Have a mechanic check it out. If he says it's running good now, what the heck? Now, you're not going to get something you can drive 20,000 miles a year for $1,500. 24 years old. Let's face it, that's not reality. But if you want kind of a knock-around van, I have had customers buy those things cheap enough, that age and that mileage, and they lasted a few years, and they were their knock-around vans. The AC would break, and they said, heck, we'll roll the windows down. They would have electronic problems, but you do want to have the engine and transmission checked out, especially the transmission, because those had extremely weak automatic transmission. But if a mechanic says it's okay, what the heck? You want a cheap van? You're not going to get a great van in that price anyways. Anything you buy for that kind of money in a van these days is going to be kind of a jalopy anyways. Corey Dean 667 says, I got an 02 Dodge Neon. It's got a code 1684. It cranks, but it won't start as sparking getting fuel. 157,000 miles, manual transmission, 2.0. Help. All right, that code most of the time is a wiring short. That means that the transmission control module isn't isn't getting power. Now, once in a blue moon, it means your main computer, your powertrain control module, has gone bad. But from my experience of those Neons, what it normally is the wiring harness. They were relatively poorly made. I'm really amazed that a 2002 Neon is still actually running. Those were horrendously made piles of crap in Mexico. They were terrible vehicles, one of the worst vehicles that Chrysler ever made. And this is a company that's a history of making crappy vehicles. So, but check the wiring harness. Check from the battery to the computer out, and you'll probably find somewhere a wire has rubbed, or very common, go to the computer and unplug all the wires. There's like 3 sets, and there's tons of wires in each one, but they're all connected. You just unplug each set and look with a flashlight. And if you see green corrosion on the connectors or the male plugs on the computer, spray them with spray electrical cleaner, because when you get green corrosion, the electricity won't pass, and then you won't have electricity going through. And since it's only 5 volts and a few milliamps, it's not much power. And any little bit of corrosion will keep the power from going through the system, and then it won't start like that. Now, like I say, it could be the main computer. I've seen that happen. But often on those, it's more the wiring harness, because they made them cheap and too short in Mexico. Then they'll rub and they'll wear through in parts. So check that first. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.